right, well, Patrick, by my count, we've got 13 people on the line.
Okay. Well,
So I
why
don't know if
we-
you want to wait or keep going.
We'll go ahead and start. I know everybody's time is valuable on a beautiful Saturday like this. We'd all rather be outside, but I appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. Just a couple little Zoom meetings here, notes. I'm sure you've all been on Zoom before, but if you'll mute yourself so we can, unless you have something to say, and preferably if you do that in the chat section, and then we will answer questions kind of after Jen's presentation at the very end of the meeting. And it's easier so that people can see it in the chat so everybody knows what's going back and forth, but either myself or Howard or whomever's making the presentation will be happy to answer those questions. Got lots to go over today because, believe it or not, we haven't, like many organizations, really haven't met in person since last March, which is unbelievable in my mind, but glad that everybody's able to be with us today. So we'll just start in with the business aspect of the meetings. I did send out the minutes for the March 7th, 2020 meeting. In reading over those, it's amazing what we were accomplishing then and what we've done between now and then with the executive committee. But if I have a motion from someone to approve the minutes of the March 7th, 2020 meeting, you can unmute yourself or just wave your hand, one of the two.
I'll move if I can.
Okay.
And I'll
Anybody
second.
Second. All those in favor, just raise your hand. All right. Thank you very much. Approved. And let's then go into the treasurer's report. Michelle, if you could share the
Yes.
information with us.
I'm going to share the treasurer's report. So can everyone see the document?
Looks good.
Okay. So as of the beginning of September, we had $11,979.84 in the checking account. You'll see the list of encumbrances. And since we've met in, I think it was January of 2020, or maybe it was March, it was right at the beginning of March. We've had a couple of new memorial funds since that time, the Jean Roberts Fund and the Mary Calvert Conger Fund. These were donations made in their memory. And as Patrick and Jennifer are going to talk about later on in our meeting today, we've used those donated funds to help the restoration or the conservation of two mirrors that are going to be in the parlor. We've had our usual expenses over the last year or so, and you'll see our expected expenses for this upcoming month. Jennifer Flood, her salary. We've hired Brenna Spray. I have it listed wrong on this sheet though. She's helping us with our social media work and also with the updating of the RHS website. We have the mowing of the grass at the cemetery, along with our general expenses of just internet access for Jennifer and her laptop. And we pay water fees. It's just a yearly fee that we pay to the county and the state for our property at the cemetery. Overall, the society is doing well financially, and if anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
If not, if I could ask for a motion to approve the treasurer's report.
So moved.
And a second. All right. All those in
Second.
favor, wave your hands. Thank you. Any opposed? So the treasurer's report is approved as read. Michelle, thank you very much. I know that's a very thankless job to keep up with all of that, but you do it very well, and we are appreciative of all the work that you do behind the scenes of keeping the finances accurate and reported to the IRS and all those fine people that we do. I'd like to take the time now to introduce you all to the new director at Riversdale. It's a transition from Ed Day. As many of you know, Ed has been promoted within Park and Planning and has spent 25 years at Riversdale. And we certainly appreciate all that he has done and brought to Riversdale at that time. But we're moving forward, and we want to welcome Maya Davis. Just a little background on Maya. Comes to us from the Maryland State Archives, where she serves as a research archivist and legislative liaison. During her time at the archives, She consulted on statewide projects and document, interpret, and preserve African American history and culture, and facilitated discussions on state legislations and contemplated legislations. Some of Maya's recent projects include the installation of the Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman statues at the Maryland State House, and the Annapolis Port Marker Project, and the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Historical Park and Visitor Center. Maya is also a member of the board of the Prince George's County Historical Society. She's a native Washingtonian, like I am, and Maya is a graduate of Howard University and the George Washington University, where she obtained her degrees in history and museum studies. So Maya, with that, I would certainly welcome you. And if you want to give us a little more introduction, or just you've gotten your feet wet for a couple months there at Riversdale and you're still here, so we appreciate that. And if you would like to unmute yourself and give us a little background, and then also talk about things that are going on there at Riversdale.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for that delightful introduction. If I could have permission to share my screen, I did kind of put together a couple of slides. Okay.
You should be able to share.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna stop my video just so I don't distract myself. Can you guys see that?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I want us to first, before I get started, take a moment to remember and reflect on today's date, 9/11, that day that is forever etched in our minds. We have arrived at the 20th anniversary of 9/11. Where were you that day? Where were you at 8:46, at 9:03, at 9:37, at 10:03? I can remember vividly on September 11, 2001, that I was in my senior year at Howard University, attending a Russian short stories course when breaking news and frantic professors and students announced the events of the day. I was a single mom and a history student, achieving what many thought I couldn't and wouldn't. During the time of 9/11, I was in the midst of completing an internship at the Smithsonian's American History Museum, entering into my senior year that would lead to graduation, and had already decided at that point that I would be dedicating my time to working as a public historian and praying for a position as a curator at the nation's premier museum complex. Never mind the fact that I was only 18 years of age, had skipped the notion of being a curatorial assistant first, and the ship had long sailed for professional curators at the Smithsonian to be hired with only a bachelor's degree. You now needed a master's degree, and fast forward to 2021, a PhD. The actual day of 9/11, I was forced to be still with my thoughts as my immediate campus surroundings were unraveling, with students traumatized by hours of nonstop live media coverage, shutdown of the city's metro system, and the grounding of air transportation. 9/11 in many ways shaped my career because it taught me the importance of context, individual and shared narrative, multivocal experiences, and human connection. It forced me to internally examine how this traumatic event and others could be memorialized in the future and disseminated in a sensitive, creative, and honest way. It was from that moment that I dedicated my life's work to ensuring that lost, buried, hidden, uncomfortable, difficult to digest narratives would have a place in museums that were open to diversity and inclusion in all aspects of their work. Today, I think of examples of this work, my work, through past projects, including, but not limited to, China through the lens of John Thompson at the George Washington University Museum, the Harriet Tubman Visitor Center in Byway, which now expands into 2 other states, Delaware and Pennsylvania, and the installation and interpretation of the first statuary dedicated to African-American figures, Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, represented at our State House in Annapolis, the oldest state capitol in continuous use starting in 1783. 1783, I repeat. It was 2020 when those statues were dedicated. I virtually sit before you today, 20 years after 9/11, and celebrating the 20th year of my career in public history, and in that 20th year as the new director of the Riversdale House Museum, where I look forward to continuing annual traditions such as Harvest Fest and the Belgian Festival, bringing forth new opportunities like International Underground Railroad Month and Maryland Emancipation Day, and working closely and collaboratively with RHS to engage our ever-changing community. We are at a place in our country where historic house museums are continuing to celebrate the beauty of these structures and grounds while further embracing their complex history by challenging the narratives and stereotypes of the past and delivering an honest and equitable interpretation. I hope to engage with each of you individually and as a group, and moving forward and hearing your ideas about ways we can grow together. I will now share information on the reopening of the Riversdale House Museum, COVID protocols, expansion of the narrative of Riversdale, and highlighting a few upcoming events. Following those points, we can open the floor for questions. Our museum, the Riversdale House Museum, reopened to the public for tours on May 24th, 2021. We are currently open for tours Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at noon, 1:30, and 3 p.m. The Visitor Center is open Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 p.m. Our grounds continue to be fully open every day of the week with visitors coming through regularly. At this point, all volunteers of the Riversdale House Museum must be fingerprinted and receive a clearance to serve in a capacity with children, including our docents and program assistants. We highly recommend fingerprinting for all volunteers so that we can offer multiple opportunities and easily seek assistance if additional help is needed for future programs. The Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission mandates that facilities hold at a capacity of 75%. To date, our current capacity for guided tours is hosting up to 7 people at a time. And for events in our public spaces, we can hold 35 individuals in the West Wing and 20 in the East Wing. Regarding COVID protocols, masks, we have actually returned. We went through a phase where masks were no longer required, but we're now back in a protocol where we have to wear masks indoors by all staff, volunteers, and visitors. We are not required to do any more temperature checks. Outdoors, there are no mask requirements or temperature check requirements. Our restrooms on site are cleaned daily by staff and sanitized in between visits from the public to ensure the safety of our patrons and staff. I will now share with you my plans for the expansion of interpretation. The vision, my vision for the future of interpretation at Riversdale is that we will be utilizing a multivocal approach in telling its story with a focus on the Calvert family and the labor force of enslaved and indentured workers. We are working to bring more balance to our narrative and shed more light on voices that have traditionally been silenced. To help bring out those voices, we are looking at expanding our interpretation through the time period of Charles Benedict Calvert, which will allow us to share a fuller picture of how the laboring classes at Riversdale shaped and impacted its success. Moving forward, we will utilize and recognize both The Mistress of Riversdale and The Diary of Adam Francis Plumber as the vocal perspectives that shed light on the human experiences at the former plantation home. We are going to remove the aspect of one voice and one perspective to a shared narrative. In addition, there are new resources available to us through the generous loan of Calvert Family Papers that help us learn more about the individual narratives. We are working closely with our food waste historian, Joyce White, to create unique interpretations in our dining room and out in the dependency areas to show the disparities in food nutrition of the time. This fall, we are excited to have her highlight a split table scenario in our 19th century dining room so that visitors can visualize the difference at the same table. Our garden has been a place where community members come to spend time with their families, admire the vegetation that is growing there, and walk their dogs, sometimes off leash to my chagrin. However, we are currently engaging volunteers and creating internship opportunities that will focus on interpreting the gardens. We have material on past gardeners who worked at Riversdale, plants that were grown, and other pertinent information that will help us better tie in our grounds with the overall interpretation of the historic house structure. At the same time, we are developing a descendant group that we hope to form a descendant committee, similar to what you've seen at James Madison's Montpelier in Virginia. This descendant group would assist with research and program development, help us engage with other descendants who've not been closely connected with Riversdale, and hopefully discover people that we didn't know were out there. In addition, I'll close on this section highlighting our exhibition on the workforce at Riversdale. When I arrived, this project was already underway. Our volunteer, Lee Ryan, who I have to thank, who has tirelessly worked to highlight the story of the enslaved population at Riversdale, actually applied for a grant to the 400 Years of African American History Commission. And we were successful in receiving that grant through RHS, which I thank you all for being supportive of that effort. Staff working on that includes Samantha Ferris, Jen Flood, and Brenna Spray. We have created a focus group to help us bring out the themes and focal points of this exhibition, including Plumber family descendant Reverend Jerome Plummer Fowler, Dr. Cheryl LaRoche, Christopher Haley, Melisande Short Cologne, V. Smith, and Brenda McKelvin. The goal of the Riversdale Workforce exhibition is to highlight the complex story of enslaved workers and indentured servants at Riversdale. The interpretation will be drawn from the lived experience of those who toiled on the property and will give voice to individuals who were silenced under oppressive conditions. The exhibition will commemorate the life and contributions of those individuals who impacted the success of the property and the slaveholding family which owned it. It will be crucial to give humanity to these individuals by how they interact as a community. And I'll just briefly give you the themes. We're going to look at enslavement and indentured servitude in Maryland, Prince George's County, and specifically at Riversdale, family connections, identity and community, life and work at Riversdale, resistance, and finally, emancipation. And now I will close out with some of our upcoming events that we have coming up. We are happy to celebrate Smithsonian Magazine Museum Day on Saturday, September 18th. If you're not familiar with Museum Day, participating museums and cultural institutions across the country provide free entry to anyone presenting a Museum Day ticket. This year, in recognition of International Underground Railroad Month, we wanted the theme of the day to focus on the stories of flight from our site. We'll be open for self-guided tours and have created passports for visitors to learn more about those individual stories. We will have a food demonstration by the Kitchen Guild as well as hands-on activities. That's Sunday, we will repeat that same program. And in October, we will celebrate our Harvest Fest. We will bring that back at Riversdale, which is a Riversdale favorite from my understanding, is highly attended. And it'll feature pumpkin decorating, autumn crafts, seasonal treats, and prize-winning games. And that concludes my introduction and updates on Riversdale. And if we have time for questions, Howard and Patrick, I'm happy to do that now.
Thank you very much, Maya. That's very informative and gives us a good vision of what we are looking for at Riversdale in the immediate and the far future, actually, which is great. I know that there's been a lot of work by you and Lee and others with the expansion of the interpretation, and we look forward to the opening day of that exhibit. I know it's a long time coming, but it will be well received once we are able to cut the ribbon and open the doors, if you will. So if anybody has any questions for Maya at this time, bring them forward, if you will. Just raise your hand or.
Patrick, there's a question in the chat asking, what time are the events on September 19th?
They will be starting at noon, which is our normal opening time, and last until 4 p.m.
And Maya, that's true on the 18th as well?
Yes, the 18th and the 19th. Correct.
Great. All right. Well, it should be a gorgeous day, hopefully, like it is today, when we can all be outside and enjoying this wonderful weather. And I do look forward to the Harvest Fest. It's one of the favorites of the community and a lot of the members of RHS and volunteers. So to get kind of back into the way in which we always would entertain folks at Riversdale, would be nice to get back into those things.
And
any other questions?
Patrick, Janet Nickerson also asked if we need people in period costume. She's volunteered herself and her husband to come by on Sunday. So Maya, I don't know if you want to reach out to Janet separately, or if you have an answer now.
Okay, I can definitely reach out to her. Yes, and just let me check with the team to make sure that that's fine for the day, and we can definitely do a follow-up. I think that would be an exciting addition to the program.
Great. All right. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. And Howard, let's go to you and talk about the website.
Okay. Many of you probably remember the riversdale.org website as it was. It was a lot of text. It was, I think, had very little visual interest, and really we had trouble keeping it up. One of the things we've encountered through the pandemic is that an online presence is really critical for Riversdale, as it is for probably any other organization. So we've really upped our game in terms of social media, thanks to Brenna Spray and a few volunteers who keep feeding her ideas for social media postings. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and we have a YouTube channel. So I recommend all of those to you, and you'll see where you can connect. But I think the biggest difference is the difference in our website. So let me give you a little preview. You will be the first people to see this. So give me a second here. And here is the homepage for the new RHS website. Familiar view, obviously. And as people scroll down, they will see upcoming events. They will see information about current exhibitions. And there's an immediate place where they can get involved with us, whether it's membership or just to get email updates, follow us on Facebook, donate, or volunteer. The volunteer link goes directly to Park and Planning, where Brenna Spray, who is our volunteer coordinator, will monitor people who want to volunteer as docents to work with Jen in terms of digitizing the collection and the papers, shop assistants when we have the shop reopened, kitchen guild, etc. Coming back to some of those things, we now will take memberships online. You can see here the various categories of membership and the benefits. So we will be equipped to do that online. In terms of Facebook, you can link directly here and give us some information. Also down here, you'll see these are all links. These graphics are links to previous social media contacts. So I think those are kind of fun and interesting. We will from time to time do spotlights, and the one now is currently on Maya, but we'll be able to highlight items in our collection, volunteers, staff, whatever we decide to do. And then there is also some information about the executive committee of RHS and Jen, our amazing curator. We also want to make this as interactive as possible. So once again, up here, there are options for people to get involved. There's where to find us, literally, in terms of driving directions and all of that, contact information. And we are going to begin to offer some items from the museum shop online. We're not quite completed set up with PayPal at this point, but we'll start out with the Christmas ornament, the Mistress of Riversdale. They'll be available for purchase online. There'll be a slight shipping and handling charge, but all of that works back to trying to keep people involved, including those who can't quite get to Riversdale from time to time. We'll post a lot more information on the exhibits, on upcoming events. All of that will be here on our website. You can see down here the links to our Facebook page, Snapchat, Twitter, and the YouTube channel. So people will find us there as well. So I'm really excited. I think this is a quantum leap, if you will, from where we used to be in terms of our website. It gives us a lot more versatility. Brenna will work with me and others to keep it up to date. One of the other great features about this is the history of Riversdale, all the way from the first Marylanders through the town of Bladensburg and through the house itself and the construction. Then in addition, people will be able to look at who lived here. And again, It's an expanded view. It's the Steers, the Calverts, the Plumbers, and the workforce. So included in coordination with the workforce exhibit that's being developed, you'll see here some profiles taken from the letters of Charles Benedict Calvert. So we know somewhat about some of the members of the workforce who were at Riversdale, information that we frankly have not had before and not been able to share. As you go into, for instance, the Steer and the Calvert families, you'll find family trees. To some extent, we all know it's a lot more extensive than this, but that will give new visitors an idea. Steer family as well. You'll see some of that here. So as I say, it really does get people very much more involved in Riversdale, whether they can join us or not. Over time, our incredible gardener, Laura, who has just done a great job, will keep updating information about what's blooming in the spring, the fall, the summer. For now, we just have some sort of word clouds, but she also is a terrific photographer. So we'll be adding a lot of things there. So that's a very quick tour of the new website. As I say, extremely excited about getting it up and getting it operated. www.riversdale.org is where you will find it. Please take a look at it. As I say, we are transitioning into some of the live functions. So some of the links may not work quite yet, but they should within the next week or two. And if you see information that you think needs to be corrected, shoot me an email. If you have comments on what else you'd like to see on the website, more than happy to see those things as well. So as I say, that is a very quick tour, but I hope you're all as excited about it as we are. And let's see. Oh,
Thank you very much, Howard. I know this has been a labor of love for all of us to get this up and running, and without Brenna's support and knowledge of the website, it wouldn't have come to where it is today. So I really ask all of you to kind of just go look at the website the next few days or weeks, what have you. And if you have comments or what have you, you can make those through the website, or you can send them directly to me. The email address is pgossett@riversdale.org. And we'll be happy to incorporate anything that you would suggest that you think is easier way to maneuver through the website, or what other suggestions you would have. That would be great. If anybody has any comments right now.
Yeah, Patrick, I'll just add, Michelle put my email address up in the chat as well. Thank you all for the comments on the website. Joanne asked why the Plumber book is not for sale. As you probably all recall, the Plumber Diary does not belong to us. It belongs to the Smithsonian, and it's incomplete at best. The book that Adam Plummer's daughter wrote based on the diary, I believe, has been out of print for over 40 years. And I think we've inquired several times as to whether that will be republished. But I don't know that there's any plan to do so. Maya or Lee, do you know any details about any publishing? We can put a link up, and I will do this. The Smithsonian Museum that owns the diary does have certain portions of it online. And that's a great suggestion, Joanne, and we will link to that. But I think at this point, that's about all we have that we can offer. Is that true?
No, it's actually online.
All of it?
Through Hathy Trust, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And at least that way it's searchable, because the version that Nellie wrote has no index, which makes it a very difficult document or text to use. So, but it is available. I access it through the University of Maryland libraries. I think, Maya, you have another link to it too. So, but yes, it is, the copyright has expired, so.
Hey, Howard.
Yes, Barry.
It's a beautiful website. I think congratulations to everybody who worked on it. It's just terrific. You had in one of the items was who lived there. Was this,
Yeah.
is this for the interpretation up to what's in the Mistress of Riversdale, basically up to about 1806 or 1810, something like that?
No, we actually have been carrying it forward through Charles Benedict Calvert's time
Okay,
in terms of who lived at Riversdale. And as Maya commented, we're expanding that to not only talk about the Calvert family, but also other residents, the workforce, and some others. So it will go further than Mistress. There's that one chapter, I believe, at the end of Mistress about life after Rosalie. So we will take it further.
yeah, because some might be interested in from the time basically the Calverts left till again to the Riverdale Park and then to Park and Planning and to Mr. Lafferty and all of that stuff all the way up to almost present day, how it really became reinterpreted, I'll call it, in the early 90s, I guess it was, with the former mayor. We started there and got Park and Planning and got the state to allocate some money for a frame around the house and all of those kind of things. Some of that might be interesting, just to sort of bring it up to date. It's an appendix maybe to the interpretation.
No, thank you. That's a good suggestion. And we can keep adding material in terms of who lived there all the way into the 20th century. I neglected to point out that we've always regarded the Riversdale newsletter as an important benefit of membership, but we are going to go back and publish links to past newsletters and use the index that we've put together so that people can search those as well. So that has some of that information, but we will pull it into the who lived there section and try and bring it as current as we can. I think it's an interesting view and one that completes the picture a little more.
And I would also suggest that we perhaps put a little more connection with the founding of the University of Maryland. And, we wouldn't have this great institution without Riversdale. I'd like to make sure we make that connection, and hopefully from the other end, they'll connect too.
All right, good idea.
Great. Maya, you have your hand up there, I think.
Yes, and in response to the other Mr. Gossett, I just wanted to say that I'm delighted that Jen is actually serving on UMD's 1856 project, and we are hoping to connect with them and collaborate and tell further information about UMD and the founding and its connection to our site.
But if you need any help with that, you have two people on the line here, I'm sure that would help, including me and Miss Ann.
Thank you so much.
Patrick, there was one more question in the chat about the Riversdale newsletters. Will they be accessible from the website? It takes some time, but we are loading them up one by one, starting with the more recent ones and going all the way back. So at some point when we conclude that, all of the past newsletters will be accessible from the website. We're going to keep the current copy of the website or of the newsletter offline because it is a membership benefit. So all of you will get it through the mail. And then as time passes and we get the subsequent issues out, we'll put each one up. And then it was also asked, isn't the Plumber text also available on the Anacostia Museum site? I believe it is completely available.
Wait a minute. Well, it depends on what you mean by Plumber text. The diary is available at the Anacostia Museum site and a transcript of it. But Nellie's book, Out of the Depths or the Triumph of the Cross, is not. That's what we were talking about earlier that we have links to, but that's the one that's out of print.
Well, great. Then we'll provide links to both the diary through the museum and Nellie's book. And we'll put those up on the website.
Okay.
So thank you all. Patrick, I think that's pretty much got that section.
Great. And we're going to keep you up for the next aspect is the newsletter, which you are the publisher of. So keep going. All the communications aspects.
The next newsletter should be out in about 2 weeks, I would assume, I think, if we can get it all together. Again, the newsletter has kind of taken a different focus since the pandemic and since a lot of people can't come to the museum. So we'll do major story on the exhibit on Charles Benedict Calvert and the land. In this issue, we will, as always, cover some of the events that happened over the summer, some of the ones that are coming up in the fall. We'll have our usual extraordinary collection of photographs of the garden. As I say, Laura is just amazing. If you haven't seen the garden recently, I really encourage you to get out to Riversdale and walk through the gardens. They're more bountiful and more lush than I think I can ever remember them. And as we have always done, will be turned over and updated and revised to show off everything we can through the fall. So all of that's coming out in the newsletter. As I say, it should be out in about 2 weeks.
Great. Any questions for Howard on the newsletter at all? Okay. Thank you very much. We look forward to it in the mail, and it will also be available, as we said, once the next issue is on, that past issue will be available on the website for viewing. So next up, one of our very active organizations within Riversdale is the Kitchen Guild. So Michelle, if you share some information with us about the Kitchen Guild.
Sure. So after a longer break than we all anticipated, the Kitchen Guild is coming back together. We have currently 7 volunteers, and we're always looking for new volunteers. So if you know anyone who's interested in cooking early 19th century recipes over an open fire, or if you yourself are interested, please, feel free to reach out to Brenna Spray and she'll get in touch with Kitty Marks and myself. The Kitchen Guild is going to be at the programs next Saturday and Sunday for Smithsonian Museum Day and the overarching International Underground event. We're currently looking at talking about what type of food would someone traveling on the Underground Railroad be eating? What would they be foraging? What might they be carrying with them? What type of food were the enslaved population eating in their own homes and cabins? What were their rations, and what were they growing or catching for themselves? So we're going to try to encompass a lot of these things and just talk to the public as they come by on Saturday. And we're also planning on being at the Harvest Fest event on October 9th. That day, we're not exactly sure what our program is going to be on that day. We're still working through some details, both with the office and just our volunteers in general. So we're excited to come back and looking forward to taking advantage of the bounty from the garden. The other day, Laura Sweeney, who is the gardener, she sent an email around to the Kitchen Guild about pears that are coming out of the garden. And if anyone was interested in taking advantage of the bounty for either their own personal use or an upcoming demonstration we're going to do. So I'm going to take a couple of pears for our demonstration next weekend, and then maybe have some pears for myself to do some canning for the winter. So Kitchen Guild's always thinking about those type of things that we could either can for future use in the kitchen, whether it's, preserving, pickling some vegetables or making vinegars. So we may think about that in the coming months to take advantage of what's coming out of the garden. That's about all I have.
Well, that's quite a bit, Michelle. Thank you very much. I know that that's a wonderful aspect to be able to share with people open hearth cooking and how folks prepared food and stored food and raised food during the period of time with Rosalie and the Calverts there at Riversdale. And I know we get a lot of information, if you will, from people sharing in their stories about cooking over open hearths during campfires and what have you. But it's quite amazing what the food and the products that you all turn out. And the aromas, other than the smoke coming out of the dependency, but the aromas of cooked food and cooking fish and pork chops. I know that have been privileged to be there when you're doing that. It just amazes me what comes out of there and the recipe booklets that you've all produced. Any other questions for Michelle or the Kitchen Guild?
Thank you.
All right. Well, then let's move on to another section of Riversdale, which is really off premises or off site, which is Calvert Memorial Park, which, as you know, that's where George and Rosalie, the 4 infant children, and Charles Benedict and one of his children are buried. And with a wonderful relationship we've established with the Paint Branch Garden Club through Anne and also Beth, who have been very instrumental in organizing volunteers and motivating those volunteers, I will say, Beth, to get some major changes made up at the Calvert Memorial Park. So I'll turn it over to Beth, and we've got a little information and some photographs of what is going on at Calvert Memorial Park and the plans for the future. Thank you.
Beth, if you'd like for me to, I think I can share about a 1-minute video and then a few sort of before, during, and after photographs. And then I'll let you really explain what the work is. Feel free to speak up as they run. I think that will work, but we're about to find out. So this is a video that was taken in 2016. As you can see, this was before the Paint Branch Garden Club got busy and did their amazing work. The beds were overgrown. Any minute now, you'll see a little trash blowing across the Memorial Park here. There it goes. Again, plants had not been pruned. Beds had not been weeded. We had a huge crop of bamboo, which was right by the cemetery, which you'll see in a moment. But it's just a good reminder as to sort of how far we've come thanks to the Garden Club. That, of course, is 410, where all the traffic is.
I think it actually was worse when we took it over than it is here.
Yeah, it had another year or two of neglect beyond that. And then let me start here. This is a before picture of the way people saw it from the Riversdale Town Center. Overgrown doesn't even begin to describe that. By comparison, that's a fairly recent shot. The Garden Club has done a great deal of work, and there is plan to clean up the brick facing at the steps as well. So you'll see that it's definitely improved. This was the view from, if you will, the park back towards the cemetery. Again, you can see things have just been left to sort of grow as they would. A lot of the bamboo and stuff has been removed. The Garden Club, I can't even begin to estimate the amount of time, although I think Beth has a pretty good count of hours. That's now, or it was, I think, a little while ago, the view, same view, but cleaned up, more flowers, more beauty, more order. The black-eyed Susans, which of course are important to Maryland. The lilies that bloom by the side of the cemetery. You can also see in this picture, and Beth, I'll let you explain, there's some black sheeting, plastic sheeting that is over inside the cemetery fence to control invasives. And then most recently, a couple of volunteers trimmed up the holly trees that are right in front of the cemetery, and you can see they now look just fantastic. So this is an example. You saw what that bed looked like 5 years ago. Overgrown, not organized, not very beautiful. These are really well taken care of now. There's another view. And then finally, this magnificent cedar tree, which sort of takes its place at the side, at the border of the park. So I'm going to get out of here and let Beth resume the discussion as soon as I can figure out how to do that. There we go. Okay.
All right. So I actually thought I was going to do bullet points, but what I ended up doing was writing up a little account so I could keep within the time frame. So I'm going to just read that if you all don't mind. Indulge me with that. The collaboration on Calvert Memorial Park between the Paint Branch Garden Club and Riversdale Historical Society came as a result of the work that Ann Turcos, current president of Paint Branch Garden Club, and myself, the past president, provided on the inventory of the Calvert papers owned by Calvert descendant Matt Ray. During a tour of the park with Patrick Gossett and Howard Menaker, we became aware that volunteer assistance was needed desperately. In 2018, the National Capital Area Garden Clubs, the parent organization for our garden club, encouraged every affiliated garden club to adopt a garden. As I was then president, I proposed adopting Calvert Memorial Park as our project, and club members endorsed the proposal. Since that time, 45 individuals have devoted a total of 1,072 hours to restoring and enhancing the park. Since the first work session in October 2018, volunteers have been successful in efforts to clear invasive bamboo, bush honeysuckle, wild grape, Virginia creeper, and English ivy from the park. A professional company has cut down dead and invasive trees and cleared areas of debris and invasives. Trees and shrubs have been pruned and beds cleared of invasives have been mulched. The park sign and railing that face Rhode Island Avenue have been painted. Garden club members and friends have provided perennials, which have been planted in various locations on the site. These include black-eyed Susans, hellebores, daylilies, mountain oats, and mountain mint. Last fall, 200 daffodil bulbs were planted. Our efforts have been supported by local nonprofit agencies. In 2019, the Historical Society was awarded a $4,000 rocket grant for Calvert Memorial Park conservation by Maryland Milestones of the Anacostia Trails Heritage Area. Also in 2019, the Historical Society and the Garden Club sought and received pro bono conceptual design assistance through the Neighborhood Design Center's Community Design Works program. Further plans for the park include privacy fencing on the southern and western perimeters and repair and restoration of the brick wall on the eastern entrance to the park. Butterfly weed will be installed when the daylilies on the west side of the fenced gravesite are transplanted. These, of course, are attract pollinators. More daffodil bulbs and mountain oats will be planted. An Eagle Scout project has been proposed to install brick banding to highlight the footprint of the former Riversdale Presbyterian Church building and installing 2 benches to the park. This we hope will happen in October of this year. So both the Historical Society and the Garden Club welcome additional volunteers. So anybody who's interested in volunteering can contact me at my email, which is alvarez@umd.edu, or my cell phone number, which is 240-383-9682. And I can put that in the chat. And I will address Howard's mention of what we did inside the gravesite. I don't know how many of you are aware of the fact that that awful bamboo that was actually at the back of basically right behind where the gravesite was really a problem, and it had made terrible incursions into the gravesite, the fenced gravesite. So we decided when we took over that what we would do is completely clear the gravesite, and we would put down plastic sheeting basically to smother anything and to keep it from coming back until what we finally decide, or what the Historical Society finally decides, is going to be the treatment inside there. We probably can put mulch on top of that. We were advised by the horticulture or the garden designer who did the pro bono work for us to put mulch on top of it, which certainly would look better than the plastic. But I have been very happy. I've actually taken that plastic up a couple of times and nothing is coming back. So that's a good thing. No bamboo in there. So if anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to answer. If not, I'll put my email address and cell phone number in the chat.
Great. While you're doing that, Beth, let me just also echo that a similar report to what Beth has gone through will be in the new newsletter accounting sort of all the latest developments. And I mean, it's remarkable. The pictures don't even begin to do justice to the over 1,000 hours that the volunteers have given. And Beth and Ann have guided this, have led this, and it's a remarkable thing. It really is. It's an important site, and it's a sacred site. And so we want to keep it as well as we can. And you guys have done an amazing job.
Well, I think Beth really deserves all the credit. She's the one that's there many hours herself. Every Tuesday, there's usually a group of volunteers that goes out, and Beth has done a terrific job leading that group and encouraging them and obtaining plants and she's done yeoman's work to make it into a very beautiful spot. And I encourage as many of you as can to go by and visit and take a look.
I
And
would,
Beth has put her email and phone number into the chat.
I would certainly support all those comments that Ann made. Beth has been just incredible leader in this regard, and the transformation of the park is quite remarkable. And I think that there are still plans to go forward with that vision, and certainly Beth and her volunteer crew are getting us there. I know as being part of the bamboo contingent, I think Ann, you actually counted the number of stalks that we removed on a couple of different days, and I don't remember that number, but it seems like it should have been in the hundreds of thousands.
That was definitely hundreds.
Hundreds, yes. You just
Definitely hundreds.
kept turning around and there was more bamboo and more bamboo. So, but I think we've successfully killed it all, or at least stunned its growth for quite some time. And again, I just can't thank Beth and Ann and all the volunteers of the Paint Branch Garden Club being a part of this. It has made a remarkable difference in the look of the park. And with the project that the Eagle Scout is proposing and hopefully will be in place by the end of October, November, to do an outline in brick of the foundation of the old Riverdale Presbyterian Church that was on the site for many years, will certainly add to the history of that spot and the greater expansion of the interpretation. So we look forward to that. So any other questions? If not, we'll move on to Jen Flood, who is our curator of collections at Riversdale, who has some wonderful, exciting items to share with us. And hopefully she can, the videos and everything that she and Howard have put together will work just fine.
Jen, if you'd like for me to, I'll go ahead. Just as a piece of explanation, we understand that most people have not been to the museum lately, haven't seen the new acquisitions. So we wanted to present it both here, and then we will put it up on the website as well. So Jen has done a short video, which once again, I'm going to try and connect to. Can you all see that?
I can.
Yes, we can.
So last
Okay, good.
December in 2020,
Oops,
we were approached by
I have to give it volume.
Joanne Calvert.
One moment,
who
please.
were known- So
Let's see, what did I do? Let me try it again, Jen.
So last December in 2020, we were approached by descendants
Well.
Davis and Joanne Calvert.
Jen, do you
who
want
were
to just talk over the
notified of this
video?
portrait of
No,
George Henry
they-
I can
everybody
hear
can
it.
send
Coming up for all
Yeah,
Oh, you
it's
can,
good.
okay.
and they
Yeah, we
offered
can
hear it. I can hear it.
to acquire
Okay, good.
this and donate it to the Historical Society. So when this painting was advertised, it was advertised as being William Calvert, who was actually Charles Benedict's son. So that would be George Henry, who we have pictured here, his nephew. We were able to tell as soon as we saw the portrait that it was in fact George Henry, because we are lucky enough to have a number of images of George Henry, and is spot on for George Henry. The frame on the portrait is original to the painting, so it is fully original. The stretcher's original. The painting's in great shape. We did have the frame conserved, again, thanks to Davis and Joanne Calvert, because the compo, there was a bunch of elements of compo that were loose and needed some ingilding and stabilization. So that was all done. So when this arrived here, during the condition reporting, a small piece of paper was found tucked on the back in between the canvas and the frame. When I removed the piece of paper, it turned out to be an image of the artist himself, Richard Stagg. So this picture was taken within a year of the artist's death. So it's a wonderful little addition to our collection that we also have an original image of the artist himself. Also, it's very difficult to see on the portrait, but there is a monogram from the artist, RMS, which is located very subtly on the portrait itself. So another addition to the collection within the last year are these silver sugar tongs that were purchased for the collection in honor of that day for all his contributions to Riversdale. These are, again, sugar tongs that were made in England. They have London hallmarks. They were made by Stephen Adams, an English silversmith. These, you can tell, date a little bit later than earlier sugar tongs. When you're looking, they have scissor shape. Those are earlier. These usually, when you see this U-shaped sugar tongs, these date immediately, you can say, after the last quarter of the 18th century. So again, these are hallmarked 1803 by Stephen Adams. This tall case clock was donated to the collection through the descendant family of the Congers. Mary Calvert Conger was a lifelong supporter of Riversdale and Calvert descendant who passed away in August of 2020. And it was her wish that this clock, which has always been purported to have come from Riversdale, be donated back. So this is an early 19th century American federal tall case clock. If you're looking at the bonnet, where behind the glass, the bonnet has a flat molded top with two inlaid vertical panels of bellflower motifs. So right here, the bellflower motifs are a signature element of Maryland furniture. So that is an indication that the case was built here in Maryland.
All right, whenever you're ready.
So the white enameled clock face here, it has a moon phase dial with the hemispherical motifs, so in the east and west hemispheres there, which was common. We have the main dial, and then we have the seconds dial, and then the date dial here. And then the two winding components that clocks would either have a key or a crank. So this clock has a crank. It's original crank, which we open the case here. We have the two weights here for the two winding. So one of these weights in the cranks deals with the clock and the pendulum. The other one would deal with the strike. So you see the name on here, C.W. Hayden. We are still researching this. Mel Kornspan, who is a docent here, and our resident clock expert, who has been collecting and restoring clocks for over 50 years. He's been helping with our research. And the thought is C.W. Hayden he was an English works maker. So the works of the clock, the brain of it, are English. The thought is also the face is also English because the face and the works need to work together with the moon phase and everything. Those would have been shipped from England, come over here, and then the case that the clock is in was made here in Maryland. The Calvert Provenance that was mentioned earlier, we do have all the information and the provenance lines up. This clock was mentioned in C.B. Calvert's inventory in 1864 when he passed away. There was an entry clock mentioned. Then in 1877, when his wife Charlotte Calvert passed away, there was an auction of items here at Riversdale. And in the auction catalog was listed an upright mahogany clock that was purchased and sold for $70. We have an original auction catalog from Mary Calvert Conger, who this clock also came from, that was passed down from Eleanor McCubbin Calvert, who attended the auction and made personal notes in it. And her personal notes, it says $70. So the thought is, she went to the auction, she purchased this clock for $70. She brought it back to McAlpine, which is where she lived. The clock then passed down to her son, Charles Baltimore Calvert Jr., and then from there to Mary Calvert Conger, who ended up donating it to us. So we do have the line of descent pretty clearly lined up in evidence that it would have been here at Riversdale, which is what the family has been saying. So it's a wonderful connection and return back to Riversdale.
So that was a wonderful trip through Riversdale. As Michelle mentioned earlier, there is another undergoing project, which we can show you through some slides. And Jen, I will let you sort of tell me how to move through the slides as we look at the Mount Airy mirrors.
Okay. You're pulling that up, correct?
Yeah, is it?
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I need to share. Hold on one second.
Okay.
That's
So
right.
just to recap, as Howard does that, these are the mirrors that the conservation was funded by the Eugene Roberts Fund and the Mary Calvert Conger Fund, two descendants who passed away within the last few years. These two mirrors have been in storage at Riversdale for 30 years almost. They were purchased for the collection upon the recommendation of historian William Seal, who coincidentally also passed away within the last few years. In the 1990s, when the Riversdale was undergoing restoration, that's when these were purchased. When he determined they had a Calvert family provenance from Mount Airy. So when they were purchased, even at that point, they needed extensive restoration. And so for 30 years, we've been working on funding to get these conserved. So they have been at the, up in Newmarket at the conservators, Bruce Schlettinger's studio. This is how they looked pre-conservation, that I know we have written about them in a newsletter. So they are a nearly identical pair. They are of American manufacturer from the same cabinet maker's shop. You can go to the next slide, Howard, please.
Okay.
We do know two mirrors were at Riversdale. This is showing an image from George Calvert's 1838 inventory, the original booklet. So there are two mirrors listed for $140, which in today's market is somewhere around $4,000. So these would have been high style, very fashionable mirrors, such as the two that are being conserved. You can go to the next image now, Howard, after the inventory. So yes, thank you. So these are images that Bruce has taken while they're undergoing conservation. So here you see the mirror panels and the Eagle-Mise panels, which Eagle-Mise is a reverse painted surface, so that the top and bottom panels are Iglo-Mise panels, and then the central mirrored panels. Those are all removed here. Here you see the layers of gold tone paint. There were 5 or 6 layers of paint that he had to remove to get down to the original gilded surface. You can go to the next image now. So this is showing the same area of one of the mirrors. On the left, obviously, this is pre any work. So this has all the layers of paint. And then you can see there are missing components that Bruce has replaced. So he molded the portions of the mirrors that were still intact to replace the missing components on the other mirror. So he was actually impressed with how much of the original gilding surface was still on the mirror. So that was great news. This image shows on the left, this is a mirror in the Mount Vernon collection, just to show you the finials that a similar mirror would have had, because as he was working on the mirrors, Bruce found evidence of mortise and tenon joints on the top of the mirror, showing that these mirrors would have had finial ornaments. So we worked on determining a replacement for that. So in the top, you see the finial that is gold. This is an original period finial that he found that he could reproduce for our mirrors. So below that, you can see the molded replacements. He created 6 replacement finials for our mirrors. You can go to the next slide now. In addition to the pedestals that he carved out for our mirror. So this is going to be what the final decoration will look like as he moves forward. So these obviously will be engilded, water gilded, to match up with the rest of the mirrors. And you can go to the next slide now. So again, this is pre-restoration. The update as of now is the Iglo-Mise panels, which you can see here. The mirror on the left with the woman and gentleman under the trees. This panel will be reproduced to also be shown in the mirror on the right, because the upper panel on the right was found to be a replacement. So they are going to have a very similar scene. The bottom Iglo-Mise panels, the one on the right is intact and original. The one on the left, obviously you can see, is broken, and there's not enough left of that original for it to be fixed. So that panel is being reproduced with the original will be saved behind it so that we don't lose that history. The panels are being reproduced by an Iglo-Mise panel artist up in Pennsylvania that Bruce is working with. We are also working on finding mirrored panel replacements that are thinner, because these panels you see are not original and they're too thick. They're 1/2 inch thick, and Bruce needs to find a thinner one because the frames are not strong enough to hold that heavy of a glass. They shouldn't have been that thick in there. So again, that's where we are now, is dealing with the panels, because the frame itself has been conserved and the finial pedestals are all ready to go. So now the final stretch is finishing up the Iglo-Mise panels and mirror panels. So that's where we are.
Jen, thank you very much. I mean, aspect of having some family pieces return to the house and being able to tell the story and expand the story is really great. And just the knowledge that we gain by the restoration process of those mirrors also is incredible information to, again, add to the story. And the aspect of the clock you saw in the catalog was listed at $70 and the mirrors at $140. So you can just imagine that the quality that Rosalie desired to have in her home, and certainly her family in Europe was very supportive of that. And it's a juxtaposition, though, of the house and the Calvert family, but also now that we can interrelate also the enslaved worker story with that, of how those aspects were cared for, and just the family stories. I've always said it's not a house, it is a home, because we have the story of the people that live there to tell, and that's what we're going to be expanding more in the future. So any questions for Jen about her comments or her explanations, or just in general?
I can't see on the screen everybody, so I don't know if there are raised hands. If you have a question, just go ahead and speak up. I will just say in the meantime, Joanne, I'll get to you in just 1 second after I thank you. We kid Joanne and Davis that they are the resident genealogists of the Calvert family. They have more information on the Calvert family and the Steer family than I think maybe anybody on earth, but certainly anybody in our sphere. And they're always on the lookout. They're always letting us know if things come up at auction or whatever. And when they found this portrait, it was quite an interesting exchange, because they knew the minute they looked at it who the portrait was. Jen was able to look at our images and confirm it. And then they were generous enough to purchase it, put it in our collection. Little did we know that there was a contemporary photograph of the artist hiding behind the canvas. So I just think the whole story is a great story of how we expand our knowledge and our collection of the family. So again, our enormous thanks to you. But Joanne, you had a question?
Yes, the Mount Airy mirrors, American or English?
American,
American.
yes.
Well, then, interesting. They would have been Elizabeth or Benedict's, right? So, even though they're fine, Rosalie didn't get them from Europe.
No, she didn't get them from Europe.
No, I was just making a point, but anyway.
Yeah. Other questions? Anybody speak up?
Janet asked if the photograph of the artist was a carte de visite.
It is. It's a carte de visite. When we were videotaping this, I kept trying to get the correct pronunciation out, and I kept messing it up. So Fred was like, forget it, just say paper. I'm like, okay. Yes, it is a carte de visite. And on the reverse is the studio. I believe it was Manchester Brothers. And so that's how we were able to date it, because the address of the studio was only at that address for 1 year. So that gave us like spot on dating of it.
That's great.
That's great. I mean, the research and kind of putting the pieces together, it's really a jigsaw puzzle. When you get a little piece and you find an answer, sometimes, almost all times, it asks it opportunity for more questions, because what ifs happen, and try to interpret everything that comes into the house, and it just adds to more questions. And fortunately, the Calvert family has been very gracious in sharing with us their family records, but more importantly, in keeping those family records. I think today about the next generation, are we going to have to go back, or are they going to have to go back and search through emails or PowerPoint presentations or what have you to find the true way in which people lived at this point in time, which is kind of depressing, because I don't remember, honestly, the last time I wrote a letter. It ends up being a phone call or an email. And I often think about the next generation of museum professionals. It's just how their work is going to be conducted. Not that I can do anything about that, but maybe write a letter occasionally. But anyway, I appreciate everybody being here. Joanne? Oh,
You're on mute.
muted.
Unmute.
I was just going to add one thing. I did finally get the will of Stagg's widow. And
Oh,
there's
great.
no mention of George Henry at all. No mention of any portraits even.
Ah.
So obviously, even though she owned it at the exhibition, and we found it in the catalog, she must have sold it for living expenses or for whatever. And I still have not been able to hook up how the people who sold the painting connect. There is apparently no connection. They must have just bought it, is what I've come up with.
Okay. Well, again, now
and-
we know.
Yeah, Jen, just for reference, I'm trying to remember the story and I may have it exactly reversed, but let me know. Apparently Stagg, the portraitist, was a close enough friend of George Henry Calvert that is it true that when Stagg died, George Henry wrote the obituary? Is that correct?
Yeah, in the Boston art exhibit catalog of Stagg's work, like 6 months after his passing, that's where in that catalog, George Henry wrote a small obituary for Stagg.
Got it.
So they were both located, George Henry lived in Newport, Richard Stagg had a summer home in Newport, and he lived in Boston. So he had a house in Newport. So there was a connection there.
Great, thank you.
And not George Henry, Stagg was president of the Boston Art Club.
Right. And that's
When he died, which is why they then had the exhibit
right.
6 months later of all the paintings.
Great. Well, thanks.
You just keep finding out more and more information. The deeper you go, rather. It's like genealogy, as some of us know, it's kind of going down that rabbit hole, and you just have to set a time limit that when the alarm goes off, you have to stop, because you could go on for days and days, as I am guilty of it sometimes. Anyway, is there any other questions, just generally speaking, or what have you, about Riversdale and the events that are coming up? And hopefully you all can put those on your calendar and share them with family and friends and neighbors to encourage them to attend. Reminder that we're now open for tours Thursday, Fridays, and Sundays, scheduled at noon, 1:30, and 3. But I'm sure that Maya and Samantha and Jen would be happy to schedule a special tour at any time that your schedule allows. It's great to have visitors back to the house and to share the knowledge. And it's a lot easier to do it in person than it is through our newsletter or on the website, but still those are very valuable tools that we have improved and continue to improve to share the story of Riverdale. So anything else for the good of the order?
Patrick, I wondered if Jen might want to say something about the transcription volunteers and their work real quickly.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. Started prior to the onset of the pandemic, but it's worked out very well during. We have been working on the Calvert documents that are on loan, the 7,000 plus documents, scanning those and sending them out to volunteers. I send a scan and an email, and volunteers will then transcribe the document and return them to me. And so far, over the last year, we've transcribed, we are closing in on 1,000 documents. So it has been a huge help. So about 6,000 more to go. So if anybody wants to help, that'd be great. But it has been hugely helpful as we're tackling this large project. And it's also working We have some service volunteers, school-age children, high schoolers, college kids who are also volunteering. And even if they only help with a few documents, every bit helps. And it's, you know, we're slowly getting it done, which is exciting. And it's going to be a great resource to have that information captured for our interpretation.
Jen, if I also may add, I think that it's so exciting that people are doing this, that they also then become interested in what's going on with Riversdale and the history of Maryland that they probably may not know much about. But I know, as being part of the original crew that went through those 7,000 documents, again, it's like going down a rabbit hole. You find a little bit of information that leads you to something else and something else, which develops your interest and fascination with history. So I think it's really multi-fold of what the transcription program brings back to Riverdale.
Absolutely. And a lot of, you know, there are a number of times where some volunteers will go through a letter, transcribe it, and then send me questions like, what's this all about? Or why is he mentioning this? Or why are they talking about this? So it does, you know, it does kind of tweak people's interests for history and, you know, Riversdale and things that were going on. And again, I think we had one volunteer who was helping from California. So there's also not that, you know, locality issue. So it's nice. It's been wonderful.
Great. And it will have a long lifeline if we've got another 6,000 documents to go. So
absolutely.
No shortage. All righty. Anything else that for the good of the order, if you have any questions or comments? I thank you all very much for your time on a beautiful Saturday.
Yes, Patrick, this is Mary.
I'm sorry?
Patrick, this is Mary Kretsch, Michelle's mom.
Yes.
I just wanted, my husband and I would like to compliment you on the newsletter. We always enjoy getting it and reading it, and it's very informative for us since we haven't been able to get down to the house for a while with this craziness going on. But everything has been so nice, and we've kept up on all the news one way or the other. And we appreciate all that you've done. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your continued interest, and thank you also for Michelle. She has been just a great asset to Riversdale with the many hats that she wears at Riversdale. And it takes a village, that phrase, but it really does. And we're glad that all of you are part of that and helping Riversdale to grow and to, you know, tell the stories that are so important about history and what went on in Maryland. And we keep expanding and growing, and that's the best part of this experiment that we're in of Riversdale. So, nothing else. I appreciate everything that everyone does. And Maya, what your additions to Riversdale and the new direction for the director here at Riversdale, we look forward to that, and how RHS can be an integral part of that in supporting that move. And also back to Paint Branch Garden Club and your dedication to Calvert Memorial Park, as again, we look at our history so we know where we can go in the future, and to support the home that we have here at Riversdale and continue to tell that important story that all of you help us do. So I appreciate it. And we'll have another Zoom meeting probably in November. We'll get some dates arranged and get information out, and that will appear when we get the minutes out for the meeting. So thank you all. Please go out and enjoy this wonderful day. And remember to be, Howard.
Just a quick reminder, if Michelle and Ann and Beth can stay on the line here, we'll do a little bit of Calvert Memorial Park business while everybody else goes out and enjoys the day.
Got it.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you very much.